I'm Adam Forziati. I am a contributing writer to Fragrantica, and I'm happy to be joined by you today, Nicola. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Nicola Thomas, and I write and produce the Sniff blog and also the Sniff Perfume podcast. And I've recently joined Fragrantica as a contributing writer as well.
You did. And so for a few months before that, I had been listening to the Sniff podcast and reading your blog. So I was really excited when I saw your name come up in our Slack channel online there. I was so stoked to be able to talk to you and get to know you. And it's been awesome. And something that we've recently found out about ourselves, and this is something I had observed on your blog too, is this mutual admiration for the house of Pierre Guillaume. And that's why we wanted to talk to each other today. So right off the bat, can I just ask you, like, how did you first become familiar with that house, and for about how long have you been into Pierre Guillaume?
Ooh, I think about 5 years ago. I think that was when I first came across them, and I wandered into one of the few niche fragrance shops in the country, actually, because we're not quite as advanced in the UK as some of our European and American counterparts with niche fragrance. And but we have a great shop in London, and I wandered into there and just started smelling Pierre's fragrances and was astounded by the range and the variety, and just fell in love with several of them and have just followed him ever since, really. So yeah, they're superb, and we're going to dive into them a bit today, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. No, we've each picked a few to focus on, and it was interesting when we first started talking about doing this. It seemed like our picks for ourselves were kind of divergent from each other. You were picking more floral, beachier kinds of fragrances, and I was choosing, the darker, spicier lot from his line. But right off the bat, this line is really tremendously large, so it's no surprise that there's such a diversity, such that you and I can have such different picks for our top fives. So right off the bat, that's really interesting in and of itself, that this guy's been around a while, but in that time, he's produced quite a number of fragrances. And I actually recently just bought his entire sample set. Now, this is something that I don't think most people would immediately invest in because it was a good chunk of change. But I will say, for the value, if I were to go to, a Bloom perfume in your neck of the woods, or like a Lucky Scent here in the United States, and buy the same number of samples in and of itself, I would be spending a lot more than what I did with buying directly through the Pierre Guillaume line. So it was really cool to actually, more like focus in on his line and get a sense of, the breadth of his creations. And after doing that, I actually picked up a couple more bottles and wore them, and was really getting into some decisions and some choices, some picks that I think kind of more closely align with the things that you were going to talk about. So it's really interesting how you can find a line like this that is so large, and then just really dive in and figure out and expand your taste a little bit. And I think that, I already owed a lot to this house for inspiration for my own perfume work, from what I had already known in terms of his darker, spicier offerings. But now I feel like my mind has opened quite a bit to some of the other scents, some of the things that you might be talking about today. But before we get into that, I was curious, you've met Pierre, right?
Yeah.
And what was that like for you?
It was a very star striking. Yeah, I met him at Essence, the trade fair, in 2019. I was really lucky to be able to go over to that in Milan. And when I saw that he was there, I was very nervous to talk to him. But he was such a lovely man, really, really friendly. His stand was beautiful, and he actually took time out of his day to introduce me to his 3 new scents at the time, of which I'm going to talk about one today. And it really was a really lovely experience, and I came away from it thinking, wow, this guy's so nice and so down to earth and really easy to chat to, and just really fired up by people like us who are really passionate about his fragrances.
That's amazing. I would have been starstruck too. And it's funny, you know, who we choose to be starstruck by is very telling. But yeah, no, I would have been in the same boat. You know, you kind of freeze up a little bit, like, how do I act in front of this respected
Yeah.
individual? Also,
Yeah.
I think just to try to segue a little bit here, Finnegan is trying to get in the way of some of our fragrance chat today, so I'm just going to move him. Um, he's a little difficult because he gets into wires like he's doing right now. Oh my goodness. Okay, I think we're free of him for a few. Okay, so I wanted to get into it then. Could you
Mm.
tell me about your first choice for Pierre Guillaume?
Okay, so my first pick is one that is one of his new ones, and it's one of his latest releases, and it is Morning in Tapasa, which is PG 7.2. Now, this immediately struck me when I first smelt it. It's absolutely beautiful. It's so sunny and holiday-y, and it has this really lovely mint in the top, which is sweet and refreshing and just really Moorish. I think mint, it's so hard to use, and when it's done well, it's so captivating. And this for me is a really captivating sort of. I think the inspiration was diving into cool water on a warm Mediterranean day, and that's what you get. It's that sort of sense of refreshment, and there's a lot of citrus in there. There's lemongrass, and it's just so alive. Like I think that's one of the things I like about Pierre is his fragrances feel alive. They don't feel like cynical kind of marketing ploys. They feel like genuinely part of his life, and this for me has that real uplift and real it just makes me happy. And I think it's a nice scent for the summer. I mean, in the UK, believe it or not, we've been experiencing some incredible weather recently. It's been so hot, and we all, English people, we all melt when it gets to this. So I've been wearing this a lot because
Like the Wicked Witch over there.
Yeah. It's been 30 degrees some days, which is just bonkers. Which would be 90 for you.
Oh no, that's hot enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, you only typically see that in the south or the southwest, but we've
Yeah.
been having it here in the north as well.
Yeah.
So,
So
but I
a
agree.
fragrance like this.
Like you.
Sorry, go.
No, it's funny because look what I brought for today as well. It's the same one.
Yeah.
You just mentioned something that I wanted to follow up on. This idea that they're part of his life, or they come off as though these creations of his are part of Pierre's life, and that is literally something that you can find in their marketing materials. In that sample set I told you about, the packet, it's more like a booklet really. The marketing materials kind of talk about direct inspirations for the perfumer, and that's something that I just wanted to follow up on and say we love to see that, right? We love to understand more about what the creator had in mind, and to have that honesty and that straightforward messaging in the marketing materials is really kind of nice.
And I think I quite often when I'm assessing a fragrance, I try and read that second. I try and smell the fragrances first, and then write my notes on it and go back and see how that compares to what they were intending. And one we'll come on to later really made a real impact on me, given how I experienced it and what the inspiration was. So
you've been
anyway,
enjoying this in the heat quite a bit. Morning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It's one that really is that sort of, it gives you that crispness and that coolness and that sort of keeps you feeling nice and not sticky and like a big sweaty mess.
Well, so I was wondering if the London perfume shop you spoke about has anything by the American House of Imaginary Authors.
Yes.
Have
Yeah,
you
they do
happened
carry
to
that line as
smell
well.
Saint Julep? Because I think
Oh,
I would
yeah.
not be the first person to draw a comparison between Morning and Tapasa and Saint Julep, but I was curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think St. Julep, which I love, I think that's an incredible fragrance. It has a boozier quality, which is missing from this, and it has that sugar cube type crunch that I think this is a little bit. I think this is a little bit less drunken, debauched evening,
Right.
which Saint Julep is, but which is it's a superb fragrance, and I would happily own both of them. Actually, I think they're both brilliant.
No, they converge and they diverge for sure. I was thinking about the comparison in terms of this idea of mint being muddled into something and the specific smell of mint being crushed or slapped in the hand or combined with another edible material versus mint on the vine or on the plant. And I think that this is more like St. Julep. This is a treated mint, a mint that's been combined and crushed with other things. And there's a difference in smell for sure. But where you said St. Julep kind of goes in that sugar cube, gritty, textural direction, I think this kind of goes a much smoother honey-like direction, as though you had steeped the mint leaves in a honey simple syrup of some kind. And,
or perhaps a mint tea.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think there's any tea listed, but it has that sort of, like a mint tea, like a mint tisane.
Yeah, chewy and resinous a little bit in the far dry down, but it's not necessarily an overwhelmingly sweet perfume, whereas I think St. Julep is, to my nose at least, fairly sweet. And while I definitely gravitate towards darker scents in general, I definitely think that I'd be sensitive to something much sweeter than this or St. Julep.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things really that I like about Pierre as well, is that he is known for his gourmand touches, but he handles them all with elegance still. There's nothing in the ones that I've smelt from his line that are too much or too, because I find gourmand fragrances, when they get a bit too sweet, they smell like they're made for a younger audience. They're made for teens or tweens perhaps. Whereas Pierre manages to manipulate those materials and balance them so that they're elegant still. And I think that's a real skill that is a little bit overlooked sometimes in perfumery, because if you like gourmands, sometimes you like those really big gourmands, whereas there's this kind of elegant, sort of balanced gourmand that he manages to do, which is really clever.
Well, it just so happens that Pierre has also created one of my only, really, in my opinion, likable gourmands, for my taste anyway, and we'll get to that in a bit. I also wanted to ask you, like, in terms of the fragrance being alive, and that's something that you say that his fragrances do a lot. I wanted to ask you about how you feel about like the middle part of the wear here, because for me that was a very striking part of the perfume. I mean, obviously I'm also a fan of mint, and I really appreciated that minty opening. But for me, like the most memorable part of the wear was that kind of middle contrast between where that Serge Lutens pine note kind of comes in, which is a really cool yet resinous note, contrasting with the honey and the blossomy floral midsection of the perfume. That was a very notable combination. And to your point, it kind of brought out that sense of naturalness. And maybe we should define that term a little bit too, because, obviously I wouldn't say this smells like a natural fragrance, but I would say that like a natural fruit or flower, there's always that balance that you were talking about between, something very sweet and something to draw in a pollinator, right? Versus something a little darker, or in the case of flowers, it's a musky element, an indolic quality, or in the case of fruit, it can be something a little lighter or pithy, and not as immediately sweet. And I definitely agree with you there. Pierre has a knack for balancing those two elements in pretty much all of his fragrances that I've smelled thus far.
Yeah, he plays with light and shade a lot, doesn't he? He plays with that. I think the tendency sometimes is to overdo something. So, if you take a white floral, my tendency, were I a perfumer, and this is probably why I'm not, would be to just, I love that, so let's chuck loads of it in. But what he does is that sense of restraint, and he he'll spike it with something, so it's not all just it's not all the beautiful element. There's always that realness, like, we talk about how white florals have that indolic note. They aren't all fluffy and innocent and sweet. They have that kind of little spike of something a bit more risque and a little bit more natural and a little bit more kind of seedy almost. And it's what makes the whole thing beautiful. And that that spiking shows the more typically beautiful elements off to a higher degree. Without it, they become boring because there's no sort of hook to them. Whereas I think that's what Pierre does really well, is he puts these hooks in throughout his scents. And like you say, there's the floral element and how that's hooked onto the cooler elements. And you find that a lot, I think, through his work, is this, it's almost like ending each chapter on a cliffhanger. And he does that really well so that you think, oh, what's next? And so one of the things I find interesting about him is that, and it's not true for all of his fragrances, but for this one, I think it is, there's a structure and a narrative to them, and you can almost feel yourself walking through that crushed mint at the side of the lake or the river, chucking yourself in, then coming back out and feeling, the sort of salty smell and the pine trees as they start to get warmed by the sun a little bit more. And so he gives you a setting and he gives you a bit of a story, and I just think that's really, I love it when perfumers do that. And it's not just Pierre that does that. There's a lot of perfumers that take you on that journey, but that's one of the things I particularly like about him.
I would argue that that's sort of the new standard for niche perfumery now, isn't it? Is that, buyers are expecting a story. Buyers are expected to be transported, and if you can't be transportative in your blending, then you might not be as successful in that side of the market. I don't know if you agree with that, but regardless, I think Pierre probably was one of the originators of that at this point in time. He's been around the block, so to speak.
Yeah. I think you're right. I almost think there's perhaps two standards, and so I would categorize them as the narrative fragrances, and then there's almost like this second batch, which is what I would perhaps call the overdose. So, you've got ones that are just reveling in whether that's a single synthetic molecule or whether it's reveling in being a really sweet perfume or being a really neroli-centric perfume or whatever. They're catering to our kind of need to consume something, really just like, oh, I really want something sweet, so I'm going to wear this perfume it's just sweet and it doesn't take me on a journey. And I think Pierre plays with that as well. I think he plays with that in his collection. I think that's really, it's an interesting thing that he manages to do. He somehow manages to cater for almost everybody in his line. I think there would be few people who couldn't find one in the Pierre Guillaume collection that they would like. So, yeah. So
I threw a curveball at you by slightly altering my 5 choices from what we'd originally talked about. And I think that's great. I actually think that that's probably helpful to our process today, insofar as we just spoke about the same one, Morning into Pasa. So assuming that we're going to go back and forth a little bit in terms of our picks, and for me, these are in no particular order. Are they for you?
No, I just wanted to start with that one because it was a recent release, I think. But no, in no particular order.
Excellent. Okay. So assuming that this is in no particular order, and maybe we're going to go back and forth, you start off with Morning into Pasa. I piggybacked off of that. So do you want to start us off with your next pick?
Okay, so let's do one where I think there is less of a structure. By that I mean less of a narrative structure. So my second pick then is PG04 Musk Maori. Now this one is what I would put into that category of being more of an overdose. So it's a really interesting fragrance. I've heard it described as chocolate milkshake, which I do get. It's so chocolatey, but it's a true chocolate. It's not. To me, it smells like I've just gone downstairs and opened my kitchen cupboard and got out a bar of really nice quality milk chocolate. But what it really reminds me of, and I think this is perhaps why I'm fond of it, is growing up in the UK in the sort of 90s, I used to go to my grandma's for lunch sometimes, and she would get this Swiss roll from Marks and Spencer's, and it was a real treat. And it was Marks and Spencer's apricot Swiss roll, and I used to unravel it and eat the sponge and eat the creamy bit separately, and what you were left with was this most gorgeous apricot jam. And what I get from Musk Maori is that reminder of that apricot jam, and so immediately, as soon as I smell it, I get chocolate, and then I get apricot jam, and I'm back being, 10 or 11 at my grandma's house. My mum's gone to work, and I'm eating lunch in her tiny little sitting room, and then she breaks out the apricot Swiss roll, and it's just a really happy memory. I don't think it has, it hasn't got this sort of narrative of morning into Passa. It's quite decadent. I think a lot of people will find it too sweet, but it's just one of those scents that just makes me happy. So I thought I'd put it in my picks for that reason alone.
Well, so unfortunately, this is one of the few from the sample sets I did not get the chance to smell yet. In my frantic going through of like the 100 fragrances in that kit, but I did, and again, potential spoiler for what's coming up soon. But I did smell Aomasai and fell in love with that, or Almasai perhaps, which is another kind of decadent perfume in a way. Maybe it sounds like maybe not quite as sweet as Musk Maori. Can you compare the chocolate accords in those two? Is the chocolate accord in what you're talking about anything similar to Almasai?
I haven't smelt that one, so
Ah,
you've got one upon me on that. Yeah, 'cause
okay.
like you said, there's so many. That's one of the few I haven't smelt.
Well, perhaps should I go into this one then?
Yeah, please do.
So Almasai, number 10 in his series. This is a resinous perfume, waxed hazelnuts, licorice notes, hay notes, kind of similar to the type of hay you might find in a Serge Lutens. Also surprisingly salty, and I think that's part of what we were talking about earlier. That balance has to come in, and that notable knack for creating sweetness without it being an overwhelming or distasteful amount. That salty note I'm talking about probably comes from part of the hazelnut accord that he included in this, because I feel like if you're trying to communicate nuts in a fragrance, something that I think is surprisingly difficult to do, you need to kind of communicate different facets of the nut. Otherwise, the materials that exist that just translate as nutty are relatively limited. You have your pyrazines that smell blatantly nutty or almost popcorn-like, but apart from that, every other material that you might use in a nut accord smells like nuts and something else. So I'm very impressed with this perfume from that technical perfumer's perspective, because these materials are resinous and deep and very quirky and very powerful. And somehow he's just reined them in to create this really blanketed, tasteful, nuanced balance of sweet and salty that I have not really smelled yet in a gourmand perfume. And for me, I only really like about 3 or 4 maximum gourmand fragrances. Mind you, I'm kind of doing like a reverse confirmation bias by saying that, because I don't tend to smell too many of them because I don't tend to like them. So maybe I'm just kind of going over in on myself a little bit and might be preventing myself from enjoying some of what that world of fragrance has to offer. But I can tell you that Almasai from from Pierre Guillaume is among my favorite that I've tried. It has sort of a salicylate quality to it as well. Again, from a technical perspective, I'm smelling amyl salicylate, which has that root beer kind of vine-like smell. It's used in a lot of fougères, actually, and it kind of creates that root beer sweetness that fougère fans might be familiar with. Almost like the use of these bitter, rooty, root beer qualities. Really, that's the best way to describe it. Resinous, sweet, but not overly sweet. And and I find it just very sophisticated for a gourmand perfume, and very easy to wear. I've worn it a little bit in the heat, but I think it's definitely more of a crisp weather type of fragrance. And I would recommend it to anybody who doesn't typically enjoy, gourmand perfumes, but wants to experience something a little bit more rich. If you're in the mood for like a cocoa butter, not fully cocoa type of perfume, this would be the one to check out.
It sounds wonderful. There's a lot of that I think, oh yeah, like I love nutty things in fragrance. And I think you're right, they're really hard to get right. I wonder, you said it's more of a crisp weather fragrance. Is it more of a daytime or an evening wear, do you think?
Well, I could definitely see it being a very sultry wear for a date. In that respect, I would say nighttime would be a great time to wear it. I mean, it depends on what time of year you're in and what your climate is like. I would say you can get away with a cooler summer or spring night, probably easier than you would a summer or spring day. But in the fall, I would wear this anytime. But it definitely is a little bit more casual than something I might choose to wear to a professional environment. Not that I typically spray, enough such that people are going to be catching whiffs of me no matter where I go. I'm not that type of fragrance wearer. I prefer generally, more, close to the skin experiences, just because migraines happen sometimes. And, I know better than to think that if I spray a lot, that I should have no right to complain if I start experiencing nose blindness, right? I think something that I'm sure you and I are both kind of tired of hearing in the fragrance community is this fragrance is a poor performer. Well, it very likely isn't. Most of the time, I think people spray just a little too much, such that they're going nose blind to it. So I already am in the habit of not spraying too many times. But if you do like to emanate a little bit, then I would recommend maybe something a little bit more casual than an office environment or a professional environment. But your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that comes down to manners as well. Because if I'm sharing an office with somebody, they likely can't help the fact that they've got to be in the office with me, and it's a little bit rude, I think, to try and choke them out with my fragrance. Unless I really don't like them, then, fair enough. But, for my average co-worker that I do like, I do think there's something about it just being polite to not wear too much and to not totally overpower them, because they've got no option but to be there. And I do have an option as to whether I put 3 sprays on or 10.
Well, that's especially true if you know that the person that you're near is allergic to nuts, especially with a perfume like this. It is a nutty experience. So if you're around anybody who has an allergy, that might like trigger a deeply rooted response in them to run, I think. So
maybe you're right.
Do you have another pick?
Sure. So where to go next? So let's go to the jungle. So the bottles have changed since I got this one, but this is Jangala from the Cruise collection in the beautiful blue bottle. I really liked these old style bottles. I was a little bit sad that they changed them, because now they're the same shape as the others, but blue, whereas back in the day they were these chunky little bricks, which I think they're really quite cute. Now Jangala's a really strange one. The notes for it are really odd, and I pulled them up because I thought we just need to acknowledge how bizarre they are. So it's eucalyptus, which is an interesting thing to include, particularly in a fragrance that's so warm. Eucalyptus, cardamom, rosewood, ginger flower, coconut, sandalwood and vetiver. Now, the inspiration for this, or the prompt behind it, is lush green jungles. I don't get a lot of green from it. What I get instead is, now I've got synesthesia, so when I smell scents I see colours, and the two are sort of linked, and I have idiosyncratic synesthesia, I think it's called. So it's not all the time, it's just certain fragrances, and it's not one of those things that impinges on my life particularly. I thought it was something everybody did until I talked to a psychologist, an experimental psychologist on my podcast, and she was like, no, you've got synesthesia. I was like, oh, right, okay, that's strange.
Side note, it's really cool that you got to discover that through something fragrance related. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was, yeah. And this one is notable for me because when I read that it was about jungles, I was like, no, that's not what it smells like. It smells like the colours pinks and purple, like kind of striated pinks and purples. And that's it. It's interesting because I think it's a really interesting note list, and it's a really strange fragrance. It has heating and cooling elements. It has like kind of lift and grounding. It's very spicy, but it's also quite smooth. And I find it odd. I find it. I get an overwhelming sense of dryness from it, powderiness. And it's not. I've never smelled anything like it. But it also sets off this really strong, possibly the strongest synesthetic response in me that I've had on any perfume. And particularly the first few times that I smelt it, I was like, this smells like pink and purple, and I can't get away from that.
Fascinating. I mean, no wonder that you chose it to talk about today, because even if you didn't even particularly like the smell, which it seems like you do, that would be a notable element for why you would want to talk about it in and of itself, that it sets off such a strong synesthetic reaction for you.
Yeah, and I don't know why that is. It just seems to be that some scents do that, and this one is particularly strong. But yeah, it's a fascinating scent, and I feel like if you were friends with Pierre Guillaume, and if you kind of took him to the pub one night and got chatting, I think there'd be something really interesting behind this fragrance. I think it'd be a time in his life or an event or something that he would reveal over the course of an evening as you worked your way down a bottle of beautiful French red wine together. And it would turn out to be something really, really interesting. It has that. There's something weird about it that I find really intriguing, and it just, I can't stop sniffing it. Yeah, it's just brilliant.
Well, not to pull back the curtain a little too much, but I have put out a request for some questions that I had, initial questions for Pierre, that his publicist did say he'll respond to at some point. So again, pulling back the curtain, you and I might write an article based on this podcast, and I'm not sure which one of these things is going to come out first, but one of them will. And if it's this, then I would advise Fragrantica readers and viewers to stay tuned for that, and hopefully Pierre will be able to provide some commentary. But not to put too much pressure on his publicist, but if that person is watching, I hope that we can get some input onto this one too, into Jangala, because that would be a really interesting discussion. And look, Pierre, I'll buy you a bottle of wine, and then we can all pour it at the same time here on Zoom. I know we're in disparate parts of the world, the three of us, but maybe if they like, if Pierre Guillaume Headquarters International enjoys this episode, then maybe they'd be willing to get him to chat with us for a little bit. So that'd be really great.
Let's hope so. Fingers crossed. And the other thing that I know that Pierre shares in common with both of us, as another side note, is that he really loves dogs.
Oh, yeah. Well, you won't be seeing the dog that we have here at home today. She's not a lap dog, but we have instead lap cats. So, No, so I did try Jangala because I knew that it was one of your favorites. I need to give it a few more wearings, because at first I found myself feeling really sensitive to the powdery elements of it, and that's a me problem, not a Jangala problem. I think I was used to a lot of what I discovered when I was like 13 or something in department stores, where some fragrances that are in the mass market tend to have some very powdery facets to them that are quite sharply powdery. And it reminded me a little bit of that in its dryness. Maybe something like norlimbanol or another very dry molecule could have been used in something in the base of this perfume, and it kind of set me off a little bit. But I think if I try it again in cooler weather, that isn't going to be, throwing that aggressive molecule out at me as much, I'll probably enjoy it a lot more. But I do think like yourself, that it's a fascinating perfume that I would recommend to people.
Yeah, for sure. Um,
Um,
and I think
so sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's the cardamom for me as well that I find so compelling. I love cardamom in fragrance, and here the cardamom combined with that dryness, there's something about it that I just find quite strange, captivating. And I think there's a little bit of a rubberiness to it about it at times. I was just smelling it again, and it's a little bit rubber bands, which I don't know, but again, quite like that.
Yeah, and I've never had a poor experience with rubber bands from a olfactive perspective. I've never found any issue with them, so
Yeah.
I need to revisit this one to go rediscover the rubber band facet.
Yeah.
We're really selling it with that, aren't we?
To some people, we absolutely will be.
Oh, we love the beautiful weird tastes, don't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
So what's next for you?
well, forgive me. I did not study French in school. I studied Spanish as my foreign language of choice, so bear with me. But louange, profane, something in that realm. I hope.
Yeah, I'm going to say yes because my French is about as good as that.
So it is. I'm going to show it to the camera, but obviously it's backwards here. But it's spelled LOUNGES PROFANES, and this perfume is, I guess, to draw it back to a point of reference for Almasai. It's got a saltiness to it that I do enjoy. Salt as a note seems to come up a lot in niche fragrance trends right now. You have those beach vibey kind of fragrances, something like Juliet Has a Gun, very very popular in the mainstream, and I think it's becoming a little bit more mainstream as a note in perfume itself. Salty notes, briny is a related note, but that sort of insinuates the sea. This is not anything sea-like. I wouldn't call this a marine fragrance whatsoever, and I wouldn't even call it an aquatic fragrance whatsoever. It's more of a like dusty bouquet, if you will, of flowers that have an almost edible umami kick to them, if you will. At least that's how I experienced the main flower in Louanges Profondes, which is orange flower. And I think that nerolies and orange flower notes, they tend to have this almost corn edible savory aspect to them that I really enjoy. It reminds me of sort of that last few weeks of summer, at least in this part of the country, where, and a similar climate where you are, where people are doing something with the produce that is grown. And corn is a big staple in the United States and North and Central America in general. So corn notes and these savory, vegetal but not celery-like qualities to orange flower are very attractive to me. And the way that neroli and orange flower bouquet combines with hawthorn is really interesting to me too, because though I am very sensitive to powdery notes, hawthorn tends to be a flower that is tempered for me. It's typically a powdery accord as a note in and of itself where you do see it, but it isn't stuffy like I find powdery iris notes to be. So that in and of itself is very fun for me to explore. And that's just the top of the perfume, right? It goes into something a little bit more lotion-like, again, with the use of salicylates. Salicylates are typically found in notes that are, described as solar or beachy notes. But again, this is not a aquatic perfume. This is, I hate to sound cliche. This is kind of like a great example of a summer breeze. You know what I mean? Again, cliche, understandable, but it's the type of fragrance that, well executed, easy to wear, very pleasing, something that is an easy reach, but is also very nuanced and very interesting. I've never smelled another floral fragrance quite like this before because of that salty, almost umami quality to it. It's like flowers, light starchy powder, and something that you might see at the end of summer. Very easy, bright, solar perfume that I think is really notable. Have you smelled this one?
I think I have, yeah, yeah. What I wanted to ask you about it though is, so a lot of our listeners will be absolutely fine with there being no gender barriers in fragrance, and so there'll be men who are totally fine with wearing florals, and there'll be women who are totally fine with wearing spicy, woody things. But that's not the case for all perfume, all people who consume and buy perfume. Would you say that this was a good perfume for a gentleman or somebody who presents as male who would like to try a more floral scent? Do you think it has that, like it would be a good one to ease them in gently with?
In some respects, yes. I can't say that I would have gravitated towards this when I first started wearing perfumes, but the reason I wouldn't have gravitated towards it has nothing to do with gender representation. Frankly, I find myself very comfortable with floral perfumes, but I think the only reason why I might have hesitated when I first started getting into fragrances in earnest is because it does have a powdery note, and that, frankly, sometimes I'm reminded of like a feminine quality when I smell powdery perfumes, because many times powdery perfumes also have that like leather lipstick handbag quality to them. Not all the time, but that's definitely an association that I think is easy to make. I don't find that handbag leather lipstick note present whatsoever in Louanges Profane. Not at all. And I would say that for that reason, to me, it would be easier. Your mileage may vary, but I would say that if you already like semi-aquatics, and I think most men can at least understand why that would be targeted towards a man. If you appreciate semi-aquatics like ambergris, heavy fragrances, I think this is a good starting point to answer your question directly. I think it is a good starting point to kind of work your way into something a little bit more floral. And of course, if you already like orange flower or neroli notes or bitter orange notes, even then, even if you like citruses, this is not a very citrus heavy perfume, but I think that orange flower hawthorn accord at the start translates well from those who appreciate citrus notes and salty notes and ambergris. So directly, yes, but if you're sensitive to powdery things as well, maybe spray once.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I love about niche fragrance, is that the gender lines are not as clearly as drawn as they are with high street. And I think actually all of Pierre's fragrances are marketed to whoever wants to wear them. And I really appreciate that, because I think stereotypically masculine scents can be absolutely gorgeous, and vice versa, stereotypically feminine scents I love to smell on men. Rose, for example, I think smells gorgeous on male skin. So I think that's one of the real freeing things about niche, is it's not quite as boundaried as high street sometimes.
Absolutely.
But picking up on that salty note, actually, I think is a good segue to my next pick.
Oh, I'm very excited to see what you're about to pull.
So yeah, the salty thing, and this is the one that I referenced right at the start as being one where I didn't read the description of it until after I'd smelt it and written my own notes. So this is PG 16.1 Bois Naufrage, and I think this is an absolutely it's a stunning fragrance. It's fig, ambergris, salt. Not much more than that, sort of listed as the listed notes. Vetiver is the only other thing listed. But it's inspired by a photograph, and the photograph is of a naked woman lying on a driftwood log. And when I first smelt this, I wrote, honest to goodness, the notes that I wrote down were salty driftwood skin. And so when I read that that's what he was trying to convey, that was one of the things that made me think, damn, this guy's good.
Right.
And the fig gives you that skin texture. It gives you that slightly velvety, sort of warm skin, almost as a sort of an impressionistic thing. And then there's that salty crispiness that you talked about. It's not briny, it's crystalline, it's dried, and there's a woodiness under there, but it's a very blonde wood. It's a very bleached sort of feel. It's not dense, and then you just get this lovely warmth and the feeling of sunshine and the feeling. It's a really relaxing fragrance. I think it smells like holidays, but not in the way that it smells like when people say a scent smells of holidays, they quite often mean those salicylates, don't they? Like, it smells like sun cream, but this doesn't smell like sun cream. It smells like relaxing, and it smells like somewhere warm, and it just smells like you've been in the sea, and you've got out and you're now drying on the beach, and it's such an evocative scent. I think it's elegant. It has that sort of fruitiness of the fig, but here it's representing flesh rather than it being a fruit, and it's just beautiful. Have you tried this one?
I haven't, but that was sort of next on my list because, again, it's the hot weather is maintaining pretty well here in the Northeast. So I'm curious. I'm sure this sounds like something that might perform pretty well in the heat, but I do know that sometimes that abstracted salty skin, crystalline, dry salt kinds of notes, those notes are sometimes very subtle. So I'm kind of curious if they get blown out at all in the heat in favor of the blonde wood. How does it perform in the heat?
Yeah, so for me here in the UK, it's more of a spring perfume, a spring and perhaps an autumn one. So it's not the high heat. Then you're right. You're absolutely right. The subtlety does get blown out a little bit in favour of the fig, actually. And the fig becomes fruitier in the heat. But in spring, when we've got sort of, temperatures in the mid-teens, perhaps, it gives it everything chance to shine, and it works really well then. So yeah, I would say perhaps spring is spring in the UK, spring in the north of the UK as well is perfect for it.
Or at the very least, an air-conditioned home.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, but it's just a stunning exercise in, restraint in perfume. It leaves you wanting to come back for more, which I think is always good. It's elegant. It has this real timeless quality about it as well. I can sort of imagine people smelling it and wanting to perfume themselves with this in the future and in the past. And we were talking about something smelling quite natural before, whilst not being made necessarily of entirely natural materials. This has that. It's a sort of almost photorealistic feel about it, but it makes you feel like your skin smells the best it could possibly smell while still smelling like your skin. Which is a bit of a strange way of describing it, but
well, absolutely not. To the contrary, I think, Nicola, that's actually something many fragrance houses are trying to do. It's the your skin but better marketing pitch, really, and it's a good one, right? I think we all sometimes get a little tired of something that's difficult to parse in perfume. Sometimes we need something that's just very easy to put on and is user friendly and does what it needs to do in a really beautiful way. And this your skin but better mentality is a great one. I think there's, while there are a few houses that do this, I think of DS and Durga. I think of, again, Juliet Has a Gun. While this is a popular concept right now in niche perfume, I would say that there are probably many places to bring it. And the fact that he ties in another very popular and easy to love note like fig which is sort of an abstraction in and of itself in perfume, is very, very intelligent, a very smart decision for a perfumer to make from a technical perspective. That sounds great. I can't wait to wear it in my air-conditioned house.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And again, it's one that I think a lot of people would get a lot of mileage out of. It's very appropriate for office wear, for day wear, but equally, I think if you did wear it during the day, it does take on that slightly more intimate, vibe at night. So you could well wear it for a date as well. It's one that, it would suit an awful lot of occasions.
That's awesome. So, okay, my next pick is similar to your first one for Morning into Pasa, another very new one. In fact, I believe it came out at the same time as Morning into Pasa. And it's something that as soon as I smelled it, okay, it instantly became one of my new top favorites in general, not just my favorites in the line. I really adore this. It does something that I've been trying to find for a long time, and it took me a while to find it. And here it is. It's Solsekia, right?
Nice.
Solsekia 07 is his, line number, if you will. I'm still not quite sure how those function because he has many other higher numbers that he released years ago. We'll get into that, I guess. Solsekia is fascinating. To me, this perfectly nails that substrate of perfumes that I've noticed before where the technical success of them hinges on there being like a bed of musks that are cleaner, inoffensive, and easy to enjoy, but with layered, highly, what's the word I'm looking for? Aromatic family of materials layered on top of it. So materials that are cool, occasionally a little spicy, but not necessarily warm at all. So think of your geranium pour monsieur from Friedrich Malle. It's this bed of musk. You can tell that there is definitely quite a few musks used in this fragrance, but it kind of uses those as a filter through which to view very aromatic materials. And in this case, it's a very unique set of aromatic materials in the form of an aloe vera accord. I've not smelled something like that in perfume yet. Have you ever smelled something like aloe used in a perfume? I mean, it's a brilliant move because aloe is definitely associated with products that you use on skin, but I don't think I've smelled it in a perfume. Have you?
I can't think of any, but I feel like I have. So maybe while we're chatting, I'll just have a quick Fragrantica search.
Sure. Yeah, no, and again, not to pull back the curtain too much, but I am definitely working on an article for Fragrantica, which delves into cooling perfumes to wear in not only in the height of, midsummer heat, but perfumes to wear if you're looking for something that, metaphorically brings your body temperature down. And that definitely happens for me when I wear Solsekia from Pierre Guillaume. Again, akin to that Friedrich Malle perfume, Geranium pour monsieur, where it feels very cold in temperature, but not austere. Very, like most of Pierre Guillaume fragrances, it feels friendly and happy and easy to pick up and wear. But it's interesting that a fragrance that is so chilling and so cool in temperature can also be very happy and make me think of sunny weather. And that's an immediate like for me, even though much of my, not to use a YouTuber term, but much of my fragrance journey thus far has focused on heavier perfume, slumber houses of the world, your dense, rich perfumes. More and more, I'm discovering that something about my personality just clicks with these warm weather associated happy making kinds of smells that aren't just here's a citrus, here is an ambergris accord, and you're done. Smells that are more doing that thing where it's hard to do. It's hard to nail an interesting perfume that is also summery, because we're so used to smelling citruses in the summer. I think maybe people who, like me, started off liking those heavier, denser smells might write something like this off very easily, but I think that'd be a mistake. I think Solsekia is perhaps the most interesting summery, warm weather scent that I've ever come across, and I cannot stop wearing it. I'm surprised that a dent in this bottle isn't showing up as obviously, because I've been wearing it quite a bit since I got it recently. Very shimmery in terms of textures. It's very aromatic and cooling and shimmery. And I was just kind of curious. I know that you wrote a little article introducing this set. I think it's Grand Sequel, Intense, Solsekia, and Morning into Pasa that came out in their own little new line from Pierre Guillaume. So I'm curious to know what you thought of Solsekia.
I love it too. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the aloe is really interesting. And actually, thinking about it, I think it's one of the Fade On line, maybe even L'Eau de Fade On, that I think there is something similar in. And that is also beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But yeah, there's something sort of comforting about Solsekia, I found. And it's that balance that we go back to. It's sort of energizing, but also comforting. It's energizing without being abrasive. And it's not a kind of get up and go scent. It's just a gentle encouragement of a scent.
No,
so, yeah, gorgeous.
Gentle encouragement, right? I love that turn of phrase, Nicola, because this feels like such a friendly perfume. It feels like something where somebody made you a salve to feel better, right?
Yes.
And which I guess is appropriate, since people use aloe to cool the heat of a sunburn. It is very much in that spirit of, here, let me cool you, let me take care of you, let me refresh you. And I feel, not to sound a little too new agey here, but I definitely feel a transference of energy from the perfume. It feels very kindly, and that's another thing where I'd love to have, maybe not a night at the bar with Pierre to talk about this perfume, but perhaps sitting with a pina colada. I'd love to discuss any number of these fragrances that we're talking about today with Pierre. Again, pressuring his publicist here. But amazing scent. I cannot say enough about it. It's just the type of perfume that, we can deconstruct this all day long. But at the end of the day, I just want to be, a cheerleader for it. I think that if I were to, urgently suggest that anybody wear any of these fragrances, the most it would be Solsekia. I think it's a really fascinating fragrance that's very easy to wear for anybody. In any season that has some amount of sunshine, I will probably, that being said, wear this midwinter when I'm feeling miserable and I need to think about vacation. I will wear this then. But it will shine in the heat. It will shine in any season where sunlight is plentiful enough.
Yeah, for sure. And it for me has a sort of almost a dreamy quality about it as well. A sort of whether that's daydreamy or relaxing on holiday sort of dreamy, but it does have a gauzy sort of slightly diffusiveness about it, which I find quite enjoyable. But I think you make a really good point about the friendliness of it, because I think that's one of the things that really drew me to Pierre's line when I was starting out. It can be quite intimidating when you first start exploring fragrance a bit more, and some shop assistants can be quite snooty because you might not be able to list your fragrance wardrobe, and it's not as long as your arm or anything, and it can be quite intimidating. And one of the things I think it's really important for us to do as fragrance communicators is to help people break down those barriers and to make fragrance a little bit more friendly and a little bit more accessible for people. And I think that is one of the things that Pierre does superbly well. His range is priced reasonably. I'm not going to say it's cheap, because I don't think any perfume's cheap, but it's not at the high end. It's not in, gaudy, blingy bottles. They're very simple bottles. They're very elegant. And you end up with a product that is fantastic, presented in a very elegant way across a range that is very accessible and easy to get into. And there's a lot to like about it, and it's almost like he's thought about positioning the line in a friendly way, which I think is a really nice thing to do if that is the case, and it's not just all a happy accident.
You know, maybe it isn't a happy accident, because maybe it is very intentional, because when you look at these, you can look at the names. I mean, obviously it's going to be backwards, but you can look at the names. But I think really what you notice are the numbers in the middle, at least in this line. He has another line like this where it doesn't include a number, right? It just has the name. But in terms of this numbered line, you just see the numbers first and foremost. And, even that kind of feels like a respectful move. Like, yeah, maybe you don't want to memorize this French name, right? Maybe you don't want to memorize the name of the perfume, but you like it. So what was it? Was it 07? Sure, I'll go look up 07 in his line. And when you have that many perfumes, that almost becomes a necessity. So I agree. He makes it very user-friendly, not only in terms of smell, but in terms of structure.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but for me, I find gaudy bottles, there's some that are beautiful. There are some that are beautiful, but actually it gets to a price point where I think, is my money that I'm putting into this perfume, has it gone on the presentation rather than on the actual juice itself? And with Pierre, you feel like actually the vast majority of the purchase price has gone into the juice and the expertise rather than on this over-the-top, bejeweled, blingy bottle, which, to be fair, if you've got a perfume collection anyway, you're probably keeping it in the dark, so that blingy bottle is probably not going to be on show, at least very often.
That's very true. Could not agree more. When I see YouTubers with their wall of blingy bottles, I kind of cringe, because, I mean, I'm hoping that those bottles protect the fragrance 100% from light, because, between a YouTuber's videography setup with bright lights to illuminate them, and the fact that some of these excessive looking counters might be near a window, I shake my head. But we won't go that too much in that negative direction, I guess. What is your next choice? I believe it'd be your fifth one.
So yeah, my final pick is this. It's Sensuality, a fragrance which if I was gonna offer, to be balanced, a point of criticism, I don't like some of the names. I think they're a little bit odd. And ones like Sensuality, it feels a little bit like what I might have named a perfume when I was, 18 or 20. And I think it just does it a bit of a disservice, because it's a stunning fragrance, and this is one of my favourites. It feels relatively simple. Lemon blossom, sandalwood. It has that real creaminess. I love creamy perfumes. And this has a real creaminess about it. But it's lifted by that lemon blossom. It's not stodgy or heavy at all. It just gives it that little pop of, wow, a bit of energy. It smells like sun cream a little bit. It smells like, skin with sun cream on. It's so happy. And you said before that sometimes you're going to wear Solsecchio in the winter to cheer you up and make you think of holidays. That's exactly what I do with this. I don't tend to wear it as much in the heat, although it does actually perform brilliantly in the heat. But I quite often wear it in the depths of winter when I just need that vacation reminder, that holiday reminder, that just lift. And it's just lovely. It's just really easy to wear, easy to like, and just lovely.
I couldn't agree more. Those were my thoughts exactly on it from my sampling. It's just so easy to enjoy, and it is, in that respect, a very good hallmark of the line, really. And that, can you show that bottle again? That's sort of an interesting. We were talking about simple bottle designs. Very effective, I think, for the mood of the perfume, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. I believe that the sticker on the front, there's 3 different variants, and some. I think I'm right in saying that you randomly get either a holographic sticker or a straight up shiny sticker, or there's a third one as well. I think that's right. And this was one of the ones that I talked about when I met Pierre back in 2019, and as soon as he showed me the smell of it, I was like, I'm going to buy that perfume, because it just, out of the three, it just really made me go, wow, I love that.
Oh, did Pierre himself introduce you to this one when you met
He
him?
did, yeah, he did.
Oh,
yeah.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
So of course you're going to have an excellent association with that perfume, even if you didn't love it as much as you do.
Yeah, and yeah, there's Heliotrope, it's called something like that, and Sensuality and Swim/SX. And those were the three that he showed me, and I liked them all, but this one was the one that really stood out, and I was just like, yeah, that's my sort of scent. I mean, it's got a big sandalwood in it, which I love. It's creamy, which I love, and it's got that little lemony sparkle, which I also love. So it was almost like he'd made it for me. How amazing would that be if Pierre made you your own fragrance, though?
Again, not to put too much pressure on. No, okay. I guess we won't push our luck there. So now, Nicola, we've gone through 5 each, and I think the major lessons about this house learned is that it's very user friendly, has something for everyone insofar as it being of tremendous size and relative demographic of the smell, right? I mean, he's able to pull off greens, resinous, heavier perfumes, gourmands of both the citrus and dessert variety, and he's also able to pull off this this sunshine, vacation, your skin but better kind of smell, but without it being too cliche. I mean, this is a house that's been around for longer than those trends have been around. So I would say that in many ways, no matter when he's released any part of this line, he's a pioneer in the space. I mean, I think it's safe to say that.
Absolutely, I would totally agree. I think he is a pioneer. I think sometimes he's a little bit overlooked. I think people, because it's not showy, I think you've got to almost stop and pay attention. There's such a wide variety in that line that you might smell one and think, oh, it's not for me, I'm moving on. But actually, it almost invites exploration. And then when you find something that you like, explore a little bit more around that, because there'll be more than one that kind of maybe fill that niche for you. And I think maybe because of that, they're not flashy, they're not showy. They are technically, well, they certainly feel to me technically very accomplished. And like you say, he does a lot of different sort of subgenres very well. So I think, yeah, they do get a little bit overlooked sometimes. And actually, I mean, I think he's probably the perfumer that I own most from. Most just in terms of number of bottles that I own. And I think that says something, because it's easy, maybe not easy, but a perfumer might bring out one that you love, but how do they then keep you captivated and keep you coming back to make repeat purchases? Well, actually, Pierre does that really well, because he has such an amazing repertoire and an amazing range, and some just really crazy good perfumes.
Well, we've been talking over an hour now, and I think that kind of and we've only talked about 5 each, and one of them we had in common. So I think that is very, that speaks to your point about the repertoire and his ability to impress us both for, broadly different reasons.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, before we end this, I was wondering if maybe we could each do like a very quick honorable mention, maybe say like a sentence or less about, or like a phrase about any other perfumes that you'd like to give like a little shout out to. And do you have one off the top of your head?
Yeah, so the other one I wanted to mention was this, which is from Pierre's sister line, Phaedon. So he owns both, although I'm not sure that he did all the formulation for Phaedon, but I think he did for Pure as Yo, and Pure as Yo is the scent I've picked. This is just gorgeous. It's orange blossom, salt, honey, summery. It makes me feel, so I'm meant to be keeping this to a sentence, aren't I? It makes me feel like I'm a bee and I'm sat in the middle of the most sumptuous flower, drinking all the nectar. So that's my sentence.
Excellent, excellent. If our viewers will forgive it of me, I have a couple, or by a couple, I actually mean a few that I'd really like to just quickly mention. One for the moss and oak mossy kind of lovers is Papyrus Desyan. What more to say? It's great if you enjoy either oak moss heavy fougères or oak moss heavy chypres in a way. It has kind of elements of both of those styles while also being a little bit more minimalistic. Really beautiful moss smell there. Something that I think you'll hear many people talk about, but just going to give it a quick thumbs up is Cosé. Incredibly handsome, very masculine for those of us who were watching and we were talking earlier about masculine and femininity in these perfumes. I would say Cosé to me leans very masculine, but worthy of checking out if you like agrestic kind of herb smelling fragrances and darker resinous ones as well. And then a couple from the blue bottle line, just because it needs to be represented here. Luna de Eau and Entre Ciel et Mer. Luna de Eau is like very, kind of smells like a car's AC unit. And in that respect, it's a little strange, but I love it. And Entre Ciel et Mer, again, forgive the pronunciation, is just a beachy floral. Very easy to like. I'm realizing in hindsight now, did we talk about Animal Mondant?
We didn't, no, because this was
didn't.
another one we had in common, wasn't it?
Another one we had in common. All I can say is amazing syrupy tobacco with very, very slight animalic and slight powdery notes that just make it feel very sun-baked in the best of ways. It's a sun-baked perfume for the fall. What more do you need to know?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's been really awesome chatting with you, Nicola. I hope we can do this again. We'll have to spend some time brainstorming other ideas, and I hope that this has been entertaining for our fellow Fragranticans to watch and enjoy. So thank you for doing this with me.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for talking about scents with me for a whole hour. It's such a joy to talk about fragrance with people.